An offer is on the table for millions of federal employees to consider leaving the federal workforce. Delivered in a very unorthodox way, the offer was made on January 28th, and a response is due by February 6th, indicating an agreed separation date of September 30th. But there is widespread distrust amongst federal employees as to the legitimacy of this offer, which is causing many of them to hesitate, even considering it. Hi, Chris Kowalik of ProFeds here, and welcome to the Fed Impact Podcast, where we offer candid insights on your federal retirement. Now, of course, our show is all about helping federal employees to understand how their benefits work so they can put action into place to make it happen. So, of course, today our episode is going to be a little different than our traditional episodes because we have this pending offer on the table, and federal employees have not been quiet about their belief to the legitimacy of this offer and whether it will stand up moving forward. For those of you new to the show, we deliver retirement training to federal employees, to tens of thousands of them every year. And so we're really lucky to have an insider view as to the real feelings that federal employees are having about this type of offer that's being made. Certainly an increased amount of urgency has come out of this offer for federal employees to feel like they really need to get their act together and make certain that when the time comes that they are prepared for what that next step looks like, whether that's retirement or simply an exit from the government. So it was important to us to try to get this information out as quickly as possible, given that really short timeline that the government is giving for a response. So today's episode is going to talk a little bit more about that legitimacy and some of the distrust that federal employees are feeling. Perhaps we'll calm some of your nerves, perhaps we won't, but this is part of a series that we are doing to make sure that we're able to get as much great information out to federal employees who are thinking about taking this offer. Given the slew of questions that we got from the webinar that we did on January 30th, we have decided to put this in a series so that we're able to address various aspects of this offer for people based on where they are in their career and the decision-making process that they have. So if you like what we're talking about today, maybe not the topic itself, but the manner in which we're describing it, I hope that you'll subscribe so you get future episodes. Okay, so on January 30th, we did a webinar that was originally intended to talk about the tools that the government has to use when they're in a downsizing environment. Okay, we think of things like early outs and discontinued service retirements, RIFs, those types of things. But then the session morphed quite a bit because from the time that I announced this in December to the time that this actually happened on January 30th, of course, a new administration had come in and already laid the gauntlet of what this offer was going to be. And so we added in the special offer that was being made to that webinar in conjunction with the other tools that the government can use. So as you might imagine, registrations went through the roof. We had to open up 4 different rooms for the webinar broadcast. We accommodated thousands of people right there on that session. It was ridiculous. And honestly, there were a lot of people who couldn't even get in because the session was just so full. So having said that, the tons of questions that came out of that caused us to realize that there was a deeper need for more specific information for different groups of people. And so, like I said, we're creating a series to be able to make that happen. Now, if you didn't get the January 30th replay, I hope that you will go watch it. If you look for Doge Workforce Reduction on YouTube, our channel is Fed Impact by ProFeds, so you'll be able to find it there. Of course, you can go to our site as well at fedimpact.com/webinar, and you will see the link to the replay as the very first video. Okay, so of course, this was a completely unorthodox way of delivering a message to the federal workforce. Honestly, many people thought it was a complete scam. There was a lot that seemed to be unorthodox about this, not just the message in which it was delivered, but the actual structure of the message. It didn't seem very government-like. The call is to reply, resign to OPM, and voila, you're in the pool. So that seems very uncharacteristic of most government exchanges. There is normally a lot of paperwork involved in timelines and exclusions and rules and all of these things that federal employees have really become accustomed to. And so when they saw this very direct, streamlined message coming from OPM, it caused them to wonder if this was really legitimate. So when you can get beyond that part, that this did in fact come from OPM, the question then turns to the authority of the president and the legality of this particular offer. Like, where are the regulations that indicate all the rules that are going to go along with this offer? Well, there are none. And that's what's probably most unsettling to federal employees who are trying to dig in and see all of the details when in fact, what they see is what they get. This is the offer, and the frequently asked questions that OPM put on the site aim to try to solve most of the questions in people's minds, but there are a whole lot more. So for instance, a lot of people are questioning the funding of this program. Where is Congress, and are they required to approve this? We have a continuing resolution that we're under right now until March, but what happens after that? Is this funded? To what degree? I suppose we could ask that question for most of the things in the government since we're on a continuing resolution. But then the overarching question is, when all shakes out, what's really going to happen? A lot of people think that maybe this is a trap, that all these people who say, yeah, I'll go, that once this is determined to be an illegitimate offer, that those people are then going to be targeted. You can draw whatever conclusions you wish. I'm not here to put that in your head, but given the comments, the very heated comments that we were getting from federal employees on that January 30th webinar, I know that that is at least in the mind of a lot of people. Okay, so will this thing shake out to be something legitimate and go through as intended? I don't know. I mean, beats me. But what I do know is that we could not stand by and not help federal employees at least understand what the offer is. And so I felt it was important to go in and do that. We got plenty of hate mail, as I'm sure all the other groups out there who are trying to help federal employees understand what the actual offer is, and that somehow by describing the offer that we're legitimizing this particular action and giving credence to it. And again, you can draw whatever conclusion you like, but for the most part, I believe that federal employees need to have this information so that they can make a great decision. All right, so let's talk about some of these uncertainties. The first is the lack of detail. And I think that we become so accustomed to the litany of detail that ends up in government regulations that when it was absent, people started making things up. They started making exclusions where there were none. They started drawing conclusions because the dots weren't all connected. Now, would I have preferred that all of that be thought out prior to making an offer like this? Yes, because it has created such absolute chaos amongst the federal workforce of all of these people wondering what they are going to do and if this is legitimate. And one thing we do know is when there is a lack of detail and absent information, people will make it up, and they typically make it up wrong, and they make it up negative. And so the idea that we have all of these holes of information where people are wondering, well, does that mean this or does that mean this? They didn't say anything about this particular thing. What does that mean? Okay. And it doesn't help that they named it two different things. It started as a delayed resignation. And I frankly was really glad to see that language because it wasn't confusing it with anything else. But then midstream, they changed the name to Deferred Resignation. And I hate this name. The reason being because I don't want it to be confused with a deferred retirement. Those two things mean completely different outcomes for federal employees. And so unfortunately, we've got two different names on this thing, but I suppose that's the least of our worries. Now, for the most part, this was a really broad offer that encompassed the vast majority of the federal workforce. It did, of course, name some specific exclusions like the military, the post office, those in national security positions, which is very ambiguous, and immigration enforcement. Here recently, they have added some language in that frequently asked questions section regarding the exclusions, and it now indicates those related to public safety. So that implies to us that we're talking about law enforcement, firefighters, and air traffic controllers because they are part of that public safety group, but it is not clearly spelled out in the exclusions. What's even worse is that they indicate to federal employees, hey, if you don't know if you're excluded, contact your HR department. But HR departments are clueless on how all this works because they're getting the information at the same time that everybody else is. And so there's a lot of chaos around this. And to add insult to injury, there's 7 days to be able to figure it out. So if we're thinking, oh, well, eventually our HR department's going to get the word from headquarters and we're going to be able to figure out how all this works, not so fast. We've got 7 days to get this right. All right, so here's what we know. For now, this program is a go. We are starting to get reports from federal employees that they're getting what appears to be more official communication from their agency, letting them know that this is a legitimate offer and the steps that are laid out in the OPM message are legitimate for people to be able to take. I do want to remind everyone that this is a voluntary decision. This is not anyone being fired, laid off, anything like that. This is a voluntary decision for the Trump administration to be able to find out who naturally wants to leave if they're afforded the opportunity to do so. Now, keep in mind, all of you can just leave whenever you want. The question is, what happens when you do? Well, under normal circumstances, if you resign, you're simply left with whatever the benefits were as far as retirement pension goes that you had earned at that time. You may not have been able to draw them right away, but there is something waiting for most of you. But in this situation, there is this extended resignation period where you're not required to work, which I found mind-boggling. I was surprised to see that in the announcement, but it is trying to sweeten the deal or sweeten the offer to encourage those who are on the fence to go ahead and go. And I've got to say, although this was a bombastic and chaotic delivery of this message, I think it does seem fair to say, hey, listen, if we sweeten the deal a little bit, we want to find out the people who are ready to go so that we can get those people moving. And then we can focus on the next action of how much more are we going to need to trim. So first we look for the volunteers, then we start looking more towards the RIF actions where we're looking at early outs, discontinued service retirements, that type of thing. I do want to remind everyone that there are very limited do-overs in this offer. So if you submit your resignation through the email indicated in the OPM announcement, and your agency accepts that resignation, there's very little opportunity for you to take that back. Okay, you can request to rescind your request for resignation, but your agency has been instructed once they receive that resignation from you that they move quickly to enact that and to reorganize the workload for the people who have not taken this offer. Very important that you realize your agency can deny your request to rescind your resignation. So make sure that if you put this in, that you're ready to walk out the door. Okay? So the next piece that we're going to talk about is the idea of not working between now and September 30th. Now, there is some question as to whether this feels legitimate. Like, how are you able to be in an administrative leave for this long? That's an unusual amount of time to be on administrative leave. But the other part of this is, okay, great. If I'm not going to be working, at what point does that start? I suspect it's going to have a lot to do with how quickly your agency is going to be able to move, how the transition of your job duties to someone else, how long that takes. So that's a little bit of an ambiguous piece of this that makes it a little bit difficult to know what to do. The next question that we've got about all of this is, if I'm not working and presumably I've turned in my equipment like my computer, how am I supposed to communicate with my agency regarding filing retirement applications, assuming that you're eligible for retirement, and any of those other administrative functions like filing a time card? Okay, it's unclear if time cards are going to be required during this time. Of course, you're in an administrative leave capacity, so there may be some exceptions to that. But whether you have a computer or not is left to the imagination, I suppose. We're not exactly sure how that's going to go. Another part that a lot of people really had a question on was, am I able to go get another job? The announcement in the FAQs make it very, very clear. They want you to go out and seek other employment, and that will not affect your ability to be paid this amount through September 30th, which is essentially continuing on your current pay on a bi-weekly basis. Presumably that's how most of you are paid, but that will simply continue all the way up until September 30th when it stops. Okay, so you need to understand it's not some lump sum payment that's being paid to you, but simply a continuation of the normal pay that you have. Now, the other question that we're receiving a lot of is the government shutdown. The idea that what happens, is this pay guaranteed? Because if the government shuts down, what's the likelihood you're going to get paid? Well, I would argue that's true even if you kept working, because we deal with these all the time, unfortunately, and federal employees end up getting all of that back pay once the government reopens. So that's a little bit of a frustrating piece of all of this, but I do want you to realize that aside from the government shutdown, as that pay continues to roll in for you each pay period, you're going to have normal withholdings coming out of that check. So right now you're used to having income tax and Social Security and all of those pieces coming out. You're going to continue to have that as you move forward to the September 30th timeline. Okay, so when we think about other pieces like your FEHB premiums, your FEGLI premiums, those types of things, it is implied that is still coming out, although I wish they would have just said it right there in the documents that they released. But things like the thrift savings plan contributions, if you want those to continue, this is just simply a continuation of the pay that you're receiving right now. So if you have TSP coming out, it's going to continue to come out unless you change it. So be thinking about those types of things if there are modifications that you plan to make. Now, a lot of employees are saying, I'm already eligible. So what do I do? Some people have already actually turned in their retirement application. They were planning to retire, say, in March or April, and now they're wondering, should I pull those back? Well, if you are already eligible, you are in the strongest category of people for this offer. Okay, you already have all of the power to be able to leave the federal government without any offer whatsoever, because you have earned it by virtue of how old you are and how many years of service that you have by meeting certain eligibility requirements. If you have already submitted your retirement application, here's the guidance that has come down as to what to do. You will take back your retirement application, so you'll pull that back from your agency. You will accept the resignation. You can accept the resignation if you haven't had time to pull back your application. Don't worry, the order of this doesn't matter. You're simply going to pull back that retirement paperwork. You're going to accept the resignation, and then you resubmit the retirement paperwork with the September 30th retirement date. Okay, and that essentially puts you in the last 8 months of your service at home or at some other job receiving your continued pay. And the good news is it is clear in the frequently asked questions that all the extra time, in this case 8 months, that you're going to be in a paid status, although you are not actually working, that all of that extra time does get included in your creditable service for your retirement pension calculation. So all of that extra time is going towards making that pension better and better. Okay. All right. So extensions. A couple of people have asked, like, gosh, I'm actually eligible to retire in December. Can I just wait? Or maybe they're turning 62 at that time and they're going to get that increase to their pension. The question is, can I get some sort of extension? So although the offer isn't super clear on this, they do make it clear that agencies can offer limited short extensions to the timeline. So for instance, if you are eligible in October, November, December, those are short extensions to be able to allow you to still take advantage of this offer. And what you do between September 30th and your actual retirement date, it is anticipated that you will stay in this administrative leave status, although, again, that's not spelled out in the offer itself. Okay. Now, many of you have a desire potentially to return to federal service. You're not quite sure if you're really done working for the federal government, but maybe things are just a little bit too crazy for you now. But the question is, what happens if I ever want to come back? So if you want to come back to federal service, taking this resignation has no effect on that whatsoever. And so you'll have an opportunity to apply for another federal job in the future. Okay. So if you plan to take this offer, you're going to email HR@OPM.gov, indicate the word resign in the body of your email, and you will get an email confirmation back that will indicate that they have received it and they're notifying your agency with that confirmation as well. And so it can start to put the wheels in motion for that administrative leave to kick in. Here's something really, really important that I hope all of you do. And I would offer do this even if you're not considering taking this offer. That is download a copy of your electronic official personnel file now. Okay, do it now. If there's ever a point that you are banned from these government emails, for instance, once you resign and they cut you off, you're not going to have access to the systems that allow you self-service wise to access your own record. So whatever that platform might look like, it might be MyPay, it might be Econ Systems, it might be GRB. There's all sorts of different systems out there that agencies allow their employees to access their record through. Wherever your EOPF lives, please make sure to go download that. If you don't end up taking the offer, no problem. You at least have a copy up to this point, and then you can always download another copy that's a little bit more complete down the road. Okay, but great opportunity for you to capture all of that because that's got all of the history of your federal service, and you want to make sure to have a copy. All right, so what's next? I think the administration is going to have a really good idea of the number of people who voluntarily want to go ahead and go under this offer. And that will probably inform them as to the next steps that they'll be taking with the federal workforce. So for instance, what's the next tool that's going to be used to try to thin the federal workforce? Okay, do they start with early outs? Do they go right to RIFs? What does that look like? We don't know, but this number that's coming in will give them a really good indication of how much more they have to go. Okay, so here's the deal. I want you to know your numbers. The service that we're providing to federal employees over all these years has always been to get clarity on your numbers, regardless of an offer like this, but even with regular retirement, to make sure that you feel really confident with what your numbers look like so that you can have the retirement that you want. If you did not listen to that replay, I hope that you will go do it so that you understand the consequences, the financial consequences to taking this offer based on the different category that you are in. Okay. Aside from that, I mentioned at the beginning that we're putting a series together of these sessions so that you are able to have a little bit deeper of an understanding for your particular situation. So we're going to break this out into several videos to be able to show you how this works and make sure that you are going into this eyes wide open without any regret. Okay. Now, we offer in-person retirement training. I would be delighted if you would attend. Regardless if you take the offer or not, this puts you in the driver's seat of your retirement to be really clear on what things are going to look like and taking action to pull all of that together in a way that works for you. So you can find all of the in-person retirement workshops that we're hosting at our site if you go to fedimpact.com/attend. You will see all of the cities and dates that we have available, and I hope we see you there. Okay, so if you are listening to this podcast and you are not at your computer, we are happy to send you the links to all of these resources that we talked about today. If you text the word podcast to 224-444-6144, and we will send that right away. So if you want the link to the workshops, the link to the OPM announcement or the frequently asked questions, if you need an introduction to a financial professional because you are in motion to take this offer, there's an opportunity to be able to do that there as well. So again, take out your phone, text the word podcast to 224-444-6144, and we will send that right away. All right. And of course, I hope that you want to hear future episodes that we're releasing on all sorts of topics once we get past this offer. We will certainly do that, and you'll be the first to know if you subscribe through wherever you listen to podcasts. All right. Thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.